What's going on, guys? Chuck here, coming at you with a look at another classic 3D film. This time it's from 1953. It's Universal's It Came from Outer Space. Now, this is big or well known in the sense it's one of the early, I guess, stabs at the sci-fi, really, invader from space kind of thing that would be really prevalent during the 50s, the Cold War and all that, the atomic age, and this kind of Universal's stepping their first foot in that. Not only that, but this would be Universal Films' very first 3D film. And besides that, there's also other reasons why this kind of stands apart from your typical sci-fi alien invasion film of that era, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But let's take a look again. This is from 1953. It was directed by Jack Arnold, who would go on to direct a couple other things from Universal Studios. Most notably, the Creature from the Black Lagoon and The Revenge of the Creature. I think there's a couple other films too, but those are like the two that really stick out. It stars Richard Carlson as amateur astronomer, I guess that's a thing. John Putnam, along with Barbara Rush, Ellen Fields, who apparently is a school teacher who never goes to her school and teaches. She just hangs out with the professor and, basically follows him around. And then you have Charles Drake, who is the sheriff of this small little town. And basically he's your typical macho, shoot first, ask questions later kind of sheriff. And this is based on a story by Ray Bradbury. And from what I understand, a lot of the script was almost taken verbatim from Ray Bradbury, which is very interesting. The premise of the film, if you aren't familiar with it, which I just saw this movie for the first time last night watching it for this video. I've had it because, like I said, I try to collect some of these 3D film, almost any 3D film I can find, 3D Blu-ray 3D. I knew it was a classic. I heard a lot about it. Like I said, I had a Blu-ray version of it, and then they just released this 4K. Now, the 4K is the 4K, which I didn't watch 4K, but it has a Blu-ray with it, which Blu-ray includes the 2D and 3D version. The 4K is strictly that. I don't think you can get a Blu-ray, or excuse me, a 3D 4K. I think I discussed that before. That'd be interesting though, if you could do that. I think it'd be very, very hard. So I picked up this because it recently released this. It looks good. Again, I did not partake in the 4K, just the 3D aspect of it. But back to the film itself. It's a really, it starts off, it's your typical, you're going to think it's your aliens come down, they're, invade and, we're taking over human beings, whatever. That's what your premise of your typical 1950s, space invasion film is. You've got John Putnam, the amateur astronomer, and his girlfriend, I guess, Ellen Fields, like I said. They're in this house, they're having this last romantic moment, and then they see a meteor crash, and they go investigate. I guess John, he's not really a professor or a doctor, I can't remember. I don't think he really is anything. They just mentioned him as an amateur astronomer. He goes to search the crater and discovers there's a ship hidden, but it's buried in a rock slide, and of course no one else sees it but him. So immediately he's a laughing stock. And he's already kind of an outcast in this little town. The sheriff was talking about, you come here with your crazy ideas, and which is weird. All his crazy ideas is this: he likes to stare at the stars, and he's basically, you're a scientist, you're beneath us macho tough guys. You should be hanging out with this girl. I'm here watching after Ellen. She should be in school teaching. That's all he goes on about that a lot. You should be in school teaching, not hanging around with this guy. We don't like your kind around here. You're just too nerdy, basically. Get out of here, nerd. More or less, that's what it comes down to. So basically, Putnam is basically trying so hard to get everyone to believe he has seen, the spacecraft. There are aliens, some kind of proof. Every time he tries to prove it to someone, it just falls apart. Till eventually he comes across these phone line operators. One of them played by Russell Johnson, playing George. Of course, Russell Johnson who is actually the only other real. Actually, he's like the only person, anybody for my age is probably going to recognize because he played the professor on Gilligan's Island. So, he's like the one recognizable face. Well, I guess if you've seen Creature in the Black Lagoon, because I believe Richard Carlson, who plays John Putnam, the lead, he's actually the lead in the original Creature in the Black Lagoon also. But it's Russell Johnson, the professor from Gilligan's Island. You're going to know him. But so he plays one of the phone operators who eventually come across the alien creature and are kind of taken over. And, the alien duplicates them, basically turns themselves into an exact copy of these people. And basically tells them, you have nothing to fear. Just, we're not here to hurt you, whatever. And again, Putnam sees it, these people are acting kind of, they're not their normal selves. They're almost like, it's like pod people in that because they're so strange and, weird. So, but Putnam realizes that these aren't right. He eventually, confronts the aliens and he tells them that, they are here by mistake. The aliens crashed on this planet. They weren't trying to come to Earth. They crashed here. And they are not here to, take over. They're not here to invade. They're not here to give us any kind of meaningful message. They just want to fix their ship and get the hell out of here. But they know that they can't come out to the humans because their appearance would startle and frighten the human being, which, is true. The normal human tendencies that we fear, we don't understand what doesn't look alike to us. We don't understand its way that's different from us. Shoot it, kill it, especially in that day and age. And there's a great metaphor to that because the sheriff, he's basically, he's all over Putnam the whole movie. You're a fool. Why am I following you? He's laughing stock. And when he starts to believe him, he's like, why? What are they doing here? We got to kill them. They shouldn't be here. They're invading. And the Putnam's trying to tell him, they're here peacefully. They don't want to confront because our nature is to kill what we don't understand. It's like, for example, he shows, which I thought this is a great metaphor. Talks about there's a spider on the ground. He comes at you, freaks. What do you do with it? And of course, sheriff just steps on it and gets out of the way. So why'd you step on it? Because it has 8 legs. It's mounted sideways. It's different for you. It's different from you. You're afraid of it. Kill it. And that's, you don't understand it, so you fear it. And that's, basically what we're saying. That's what the aliens are saying. They don't want to be involved in that. So he kind of convinces the sheriff a bit, but eventually there's this great scene where, the sheriff says the mental breakdown because he can't handle it. He's paranoid's getting to him too much. And he's like, sure, we'll get the posse. I'm going to blow these guys up. And, and so it's up to Putnam to basically try and get to the aliens and try and get them, save or prevent the posse from coming and killing the aliens and giving them time because the alien can say we just need a few more hours. And, which is interesting. They apparently measure time the same way that humans do. But, and that's, what it is. So Putnam, eventually he talks to the aliens and gets them to give the people, because like I said, they took a lot of people as hostages and duplicate themselves just so they could walk around freely and get the parts they needed to help fix their ship. They didn't harm them or anything like that, but it did threaten them when they were threatening. Say, if you come to us with violence, we'll respond with violence. It's not what we want to do, but if it comes to that, we'll do that, more or less. Long story short, too late. Putnam's able to hold up the posse. The aliens will fix their ship. It's funny because it said we only need a few more hours. Then within like 15 minutes, they fix the ship and they're out of here. And all's well. And the posse, there's like no remorse on the sheriff. Once they realize, the sheriff and the posse, once they realize that people came back, they're safe. They did me no harm. There's no like, oh well, we were mistaken. We feel bad. And I was like, well, they're gone for good now. We chase them, like that kind of mentality, that macho, whatever, which is very typical of the time. And that's basically the gist of it. And movies, it's a quick watch, which it's like about an hour and a half, which is funny because this is much like what happened with House of Wax. It's an hour and a half, about 50 minutes into it, there was an intermission, which kind of blew me away because there's only like, another half an hour left of the film. We're throwing an intermission here. It's so strange. But it goes quickly. And what's, again, when I was saying what was different about this particular film in terms of other sci-fi films of that era is that, the aliens are benevolent. They're not here to take over the world, to, like I said, to destroy. I guess you have benevolent aliens in Data so still, but they're not here for a message. I mean, the aliens do not want to be here. They made it clear they're not. We don't want to come here. It's not time. You guys are not ready for us. We got a flat tire. We're stuck here. We're just trying to think. We blew a radiator gasket. Whatever the case, they got stranded here, and they're trying to find a way out. Which is an interesting concept because I don't. From everything, I have not. Obviously, I've not seen every single sci-fi film of the 50s, but from the premises and what I've read about and what clips I've seen, all that stuff, and the few that I have seen, none of them have the concept of the friendly alien. More so, maybe like I said, maybe the Day of the Earth is still the closest I could think of that. Most of the aliens are here for malevolent purposes, more or less. Take a look at the biggest one. It's out there, most popular, War of the Worlds, obviously. I think Earth vs. the Flying Saucers. There's a couple other ones out there, but most of them, it's very rare to have, the lesson here that the aliens are not here to invade, but they know they can't trust us because we're not going to trust them just because they look how they appear. Which brings me to the next point. Now, the creature design from It Came From Alice is fairly well known. It's kind of a weird, and it's not shown a lot in the movie. Most of the movie you're seeing, from the aliens' POV, which is, I think, interesting and probably something that was one of the first time kind of thing done at that time, at least that I can think of. And it's kind of weird, bubbly, almost robot monster like, I guess, in a bubble, but without the bubbles. But you're seeing, the aliens, like I said, POV, and they leave this little kind of glittery dust trail behind them, which disappears when they leave. And then because the form they have is kind of a big hulking, cycloptic, hairy kind of. I don't know. It's really because you don't really see too much. It's kind of straight, but again, the image is recognizable. I think it's been seen a lot. You see it, you'll know. You may know what movie's from, but you know that image. And from what I was gather on some of the mini documentary as a bonus feature on here, the creature was kind of an afterthought. Originally, they weren't going to have this film with a creature. It's going to be all the POV and not actually show a creature, just to react to people for the creature. But I guess when they did test screenings and of course, they were filming this in 3D, and they realized we got to have something that kind of, comes at you, some kind of creature, startling something. So that's where they kind of created this creature last minute. So you don't see a whole lot of them in it. Basically, maybe 3-4 shots, if that. Excuse me, and they're all very quick. Most of it with the POV or as the doppelganger humans. But again, still in that little time, the creature is somewhat of iconic. In the point, like I said, not that everyone will know where it's from, possibly, but I'm sure they've seen that image. They know that image that it's a sci-fi alien. So the 3D. As I watched this again, this is in the Blu-ray 3D because I will not watch the Anaglyph 3Ds. Now there is an option for Anaglyph on here, but this is strictly Blu-ray 3D. It was pretty good. Nothing overwhelming, though. The 3D it's used well. As far as spacing, kind of like what I mentioned. If you go back to my first in this series, the House of Wax, how everything is placed for foreground, middle ground, background, everything. It's got layers. You can definitely feel the depth. The movie takes place in the desert. There's a lot of scenes where they kind of go into the wastelands, but you've got, some of these kind of, I guess, cacti, if you will, foreground, but, you can really sense the sense of depth. So all that plays well. And for certain scenes, it's captivating. It's done well. And again, there are no, I guess, shock moments, if you will. the typical what you expect for 3D. It's a lot like, again, this is a lot like a House of Wax, which I think if I haven't mentioned, when they were trying to get this out, they were hoping to get this out before House of Wax. They didn't. So it's interesting in that context of House of Wax is it was done it very well and in color too. What is black and white? But I think the 3D tends to work really well in black and white. Honestly, I think in black and white the depth sometimes can be easier to detect than it is with the color. Not always. It's not necessarily. I mean, I'm not a technical guru when it comes to 3D or anything like that. I just know what my eyes tell me, and I feel like in black and white sometimes 3D can turn out pretty good. But again, there's no gags, if you will, and it came from outer space. I can really think of only two really kind of quote unquote gags in the film. I mean, the film starts off. It gets right off to a start with the ship coming down, and then actually you see it twice because before the credits come down, you see it kind of right into the screen, and it blows into the title. It came from outer space, which of course titles are always good in 3D. The lettering, that always looks good because you can really get the depth on that. And it's funny because they replay that shot again in the opening when the two main characters are talking, and then you see the ship crash. It's basically the exact same shot again, and right up to the explosion in the screen. But that's not the best gag. The best gag is a very simple, subtle one. It's Putnam and Ellen as they're talking at the very beginning, because he has his his little house out in the desert, like middle of nowhere. They caught him this portion. He has a telescope. He's looking at the stars, and they have it right, and they just kind of move it and point it in a direction, and it's it cuts coming out of the screen. And again, it's not like bam, here it is. It's basically using it as part of the story. He's an astronomer. He's looking at it. But it's done very subtly, and it's really effective. And you like that. It's not just like throwing it at you, nothing like that. That's like the one really major standout pop out effect in the film, which is crazy. It's a simple. Which is crazy because it's not crazy. It is very simple. Like I said, subtle, a telescope turning, but you can really see it really feels like it's popping out of the screen. The other effect, and this is more thrown at you, is the rock slide in the crater where Putnam discovers the aircraft flying saucer, whatever you want to call it, when he's buried in the rocks. So the rocks are coming down, and there's a lot of scenes where they're all coming down, but there's a couple of rocks that jump out at you, obviously, and a couple of those are very effective. And those, like I said, the rocks and the telescope, those are the only two really gag moments in the film. Everything else is just a matter of depth and space and perspective in the 3Ds, which is done to a really good effect because the aliens are kind of hiding in a mine shaft, more or less, where mine shaft leads down to where the ship's in the the crater where the ship's at, and Putnam kind of confronts them. And he looks into the mine shaft, and you really get that depth that it's a deep, dark, tunnel that these aliens are going to come out of. Something that we totally lost in 2D. It'd just be there, you wouldn't think much. But this is really gives that if that tunnel goes deep, long, and it's when the alien does kind of come out of it when he reveals himself to Putnam, that is a great effect. Again, it's not a get you moment. It doesn't really pop out. It's very subtle. It's that sense of depth, but it really feels like it's coming out of the shadows. It's really effectively done. So, kudos to the cinematography on that, and maybe in direction. So I'm curious to see now, because I've never seen Creature of the Black Lagoon in 3D. I do have it. That's one reason I got the Blu-ray set of the Universal Monsters so I could get those in 3D. And I'm really curious to see. I mean, I've seen the movie. I know how it looks at 2D. I'm really curious to see how he does. Because this, like I said, this was done very well. And I think Creatures are definitely more compelling movie. There's a lot more, obviously, you can do with gag-wise. And there's like more environment with the swamps. I'm really curious to see how that 3D will look in that. But overall, like I said, it's a good presentation. It's a fun, subtle 3D. And again, it goes back to what I said about House of Wax, where the 3D is not so much a gimmick, it's just another tool to kind of tell the story, which is, very good. what else we got here? So, other notes, some of the costume designs on this film. Apparently, uh, there's a couple uh, designs that didn't make it before they came on their final creature. One of those would basically kind of be redone and retooled later on for another Universal classic, This Island Earth, and it would be the mutant, the famous trouser wearing, big headed, brain aliens from This Island Earth. And that wasn't really concept for the creature from it came from outer space, which I think is a pretty cool fact. Now, this 4K Blu-ray, again, I said I had a regular Blu-ray 4, but this is all out of print. But this was just released, so it was still able to get hold of. And again, even if you don't want a Blu-ray or a 3D or the film that's, you've got the 4K, the film is still a classic. It's still enjoyable, even in 2D. I think you lose a lot in the 2D for, I don't want to say its appearance, but I don't know. It's not really, it doesn't really affect the storytelling necessarily, but I think the immersion of it, you lose something. But again, it's still watchable in 2D. Interesting point. See this actress right here? I can't remember her name, and I'll put it up here. I was reading about, because these three are your main, it's about these three here mostly. Richard Carlson, Barbara Rush, and Charles Drake. That's what this woman here, she has like about 3 lines and is in it for like 5 minutes, if even that. And she plays like a girlfriend of the Russell Johnson character. It's basically, she's in and out. Why is she on here then? Why is she so important? Well, what I read about, apparently she was going to be Universal's next Marilyn Monroe. Again, I can't remember her name. I'm sure I've already put it up here. And they were basically grooming her to be a big star. I don't think that ever happened. At least not to the degree they wanted. But so they put her in there because she even got like a title credit at the end. And there's nothing. The titles are actually at the end of the film, which is something very rare back then. Full titles, it's something that's done all the time now, which is interesting. But yeah, they gave her a full headshot title, all that. And I'm like, why does she warrant that? She wasn't even in the film. She's not even a main person. So there's that. So just to show this off, get that out of here. Again, you have your 4K Blu-ray in here, and this Blu-ray does have the the option for 2D or 3D. And it does have a digital code if you do get this 4K. As far as special features on this, you don't really have anything on here. Minus, you have commentary from film historian Tom Weaver, and the trailer, a 2D trailer and a 3D trailer, which is kind of neat. But the thing that's really nice on here that I really liked, which is where I got some of this information from too, was the Universe According to Universal documentary. It's about half an hour long, and I always love these kind of documentaries. Universal's did a lot of these kind of documentaries on their monsters collection, all their Universal classic monsters, and it's hosted by the late Rudy Beimler, who was a great historian. I mean, he shows up a lot on Universal stuff, and I always love listening to him and other historians of that time. But they're talking about little history with Universal and the sci-fi movie and how they got started and all that kind of thing. And it's a nice little, documentary. I always enjoy these kind of little Universal documentaries that they do put on their sets. So, it came from outer space. A 1950s sci-fi classic that's definitely not the typical sci-fi film from that decade. I definitely would check it out. If you're a lover of the 50s sci-fi films, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with this. You don't have to see it in 3D. You can see it in 2D. If you can see it in 3D, by all means do so, because I think you'll enjoy it. But it's not necessary. I don't think it's going to affect your viewing of it as much as it will, like say House of Wax. House of Wax right now is a standard bearer for 3D, because that movie is like it's a good movie by itself, but when you watch House of Wax in 3D, it's like 20 times better. This one, I think, you could go either way. I mean, you could watch it 2D. It's not going to be as what's the word we're looking for? The 3D is not going to be as I'm going to say overwhelming is not quite the right word. Give me a second. It'll be there. It's not going to be quite as overly impressive, I guess, for lack of a better terminology. While it'll be impressive in 3D, it's not going to like blow your socks. It's going to be enjoyable. It's going to be fun, but it's not going to be like, wow, that's amazing. It's going to be nice. It's going to be fun. It's going to give it an added element, but it's not going to really give a whole lot to it, a whole lot more to it than, like I said, like House of Wax's 3D does for its film. But it's still good, and I definitely check it out. I'm glad I got to see the 3D version of it. And again, as I said before, I don't know if there is an anaglyph version of it. If you have one, avoid it. Just avoid anaglyph 3D altogether. It's not fun 3D. I will keep harking on that. If you can get, if you have the setup to watch Blu-ray 3D, I know that's a very hard thing now because who's making Blu-ray or 3D TVs? Nobody. I still have one from, I think I said before, Chris was like 3. But I'm not watching it. I have a projector. That's what I'm watching, which the 3D on the projector is much better than a 3D on the TV. And I think PlayStation is a virtual headset. So there's still ways to do it. And if you can, by all means, do so. And, just as I have a, as far as players go, obviously the PS5 doesn't do Blu-ray or Blu-ray 3 anymore, but PS4, PS3 still does. I know you hardly believe, a lot of Blu-ray players actually have 3D. I mean, you can go and find some of the basic Sony's, cheap Sony Blu-ray players. I have my region-free Sony player has 3D. And on top of that, I have my 4K Panasonic, the high-end $400-some player has 3D. So, they're there. They don't advertise it, but a lot of times it's surprisingly an option. I was surprised that I got a 4K player, the high-end 4K player, and even the low end. I sit back to the Sony. I had a Sony before I had the high-end Panasonic. I had a, like less than $100, little small Sony 4K player. Actually, it's probably a little over $100, maybe $200. It is 4K, but it had 3D in it too. So they're still out there. The technology is still out there to play. It doesn't matter if you can find technology to watch it. That's the trick. Do you have a projector, which is probably the best way to watch in Blu-ray 3D. But I'm on a tangent here. So that is it for now. Before I go any further, if you enjoyed it, just click thumbs up, share, subscribe, leave me a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on It Came from Outer Space. If you've seen it, do you want to see it? Whatever the case may be. Or just say hi. I'll always take hi. So until next time, this is Chuck saying I will see you on the other side.